Good evening, everyone. We're getting ready to start now, and we just thank you for being here tonight for our very first WTO forum. And as we have been promoting it, we have stated in our promotion that WTO is a threat to the Bahamas. And in our session tonight, I believe that you will get tremendous information so that you could make a decision yourself. But as far as many leaders are concerned, we feel that WTO is not for the Bahamas. So as we prepare to enter into this forum, we're going to ask everybody to stand, and we're going to invite Apostle Anthony Grant, the senior pastor of Agape House, to come and open us up in prayer.
Let us pray. Most gracious and eternal God, we pause now to give you thanks and praise for your goodness. We thank you, Lord, for your keeping power. We thank you for your presence with us. Father, we want to especially thank you this evening for these two coalition groups, hallelujah, that desire us to have information, because we understand, God, that knowledge is power. But after we have received the knowledge, God, you want us to do something with it. If we lock it in a suitcase and put it away, then it's no good to us. But we have a decision to make at the end of the day. Yes. We pray, Father, that all that we will receive tonight will be clear to us, that we will have a full understanding about the WTO, that, God, we will be able to make that right decision, that you will truly be glorified in all things. Now bless this evening, bless the speakers, God. For Christ's sake we pray. Amen.
There's been much talked about concerning WTO, especially since the election of May 2017. The present government administration has emphasized that they are seeking to accelerate our entry into the WTO. Now, we say accelerate, but the Bahamas had signed on to the WTO some time back. But in fact, one newspaper article actually says that the Bahamas is one of the longest countries in terms of years in the ascension process into World WTO. And it's an interesting word that they use, ascension, which conveys the idea that where you are now, that when you ascend to join the WTO, that the countries that will join will be better off. I am one that firmly believes that we will not be better off. And there has been many that have been sharing information concerning WTO. We must give recognition to Kendall Colbrook, who's here tonight, has been producing several different videos. And many of you would have seen them on Facebook and WhatsApp talking about WTO. We're grateful for persons like himself who have taken a stand to make their voice be heard and sound the alarm. Because this forum also serves as an alarm for the Bahamian people. And our intention is not only for you to receive information in this forum, but it's being recorded so that it can be put on YouTube, Facebook, so that Bahamians and people across our country will be able to hear what is said here tonight. And so this is very important for us to say that to you. And so that even with those who are not here tonight, you have the ability to just say to them, it's online. This forum will be online. Now, I just want to say a few things, but we want to go ahead and make sure we get our first presenter on. Our second presenter, he's on his way from the hotel here. But one of the things for me as a pastor, also as one that has been involved in activist work in our country, one of the things that disturbs me is to see what is happening to our country both economically and socially. What has happened in our country is that the wealth in our country is actually just circulating around a few people. And when it comes to most Bahamians are at a financial disadvantage in their own country. The middle class, as we have heard, I believe the middle class is disappearing. It is obvious that the policies that have been adopted has not created common wealth. As we are called and known as a nation, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, wealth is not common in the Bahamas. And there's a need for people across the country to unite together and to begin to let their voices be heard. Because what should happen even before you talk about the WTO is you make sure that your citizens in your country have been positioned to prosper. They have to be positioned to be empowered. We have to be strong economically as Bahamians before you can expose this system to our country. And so we believe that the time is now more than ever before. Our government, and this is our government, my Prime Minister, your Cabinet Ministers, seem to be bent on accelerating us into this WTO. And it's going to take our voices to be heard. And I don't want anyone to think that anyone here is anti-government. I'm not anti-government. I believe in our government. And I believe in our Prime Minister and the Cabinet. But if there is something that will have adverse effect and bring economic harm to our country, to both business people and to workers, it is necessary that we let our voices be heard strongly and that we fight for our country. We more Bahamians need to fight. And I'm not talking about rocks and bottles now, but I'm talking about that we have to be willing to, as God has blessed so many of us, we need to be willing to make sacrifices to preserve this country and for this country to become what it was ordained to be. I believe we are ordained to be a great country. Amen. We may not have millions of people, but I can tell you something, Bahamians are making an impact in the world. But we need to be empowered in our own country. And so I want to encourage everyone here. This forum has been organized and brought to you by the Coalition of Trade Unions and union leaders across Grand Bahama, along with the Coalition of Concerned Citizens. We work together on so many different things because we believe that our country is worth fighting for and workers are worth fighting for. So, without any further delay, I want us to welcome our very first speaker. Now, before I just read some of his qualifications, because our speaker is very qualified, not only educationally, but from his experience, and he's still a young man. And so, but I have the opportunity of connecting with our speaker. At one point, I arranged for him to have a special meeting with the Bahamas Christian Council in Nassau to bring them up to date concerning the threat of WTO. And in fact, with this meeting, the president of the Bahamas Christian Council he heard about the meeting and he contacted me, and he wanted to know when this would be coming to Nassau. Or he has to come and fly in. So we just made some assurance that we work with the unions and get a forum done in Nassau so that we can hear from these tremendous speakers that we have here tonight. Well, our speaker for tonight is Paul D. Morse, Jr. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee, and a Bachelor's of Law degree from the University of Wolverhampton in England, UK. Mr. Morse is a member of the bar for both England and Wales and the Bahamas. He was born into business and worked each day with his siblings and parents in the family business of food stores. At the age of 13, he began his career in management by managing one of the family stores, and this is where he got his business acumen. He's a human rights activist. He's a champion in the cause of many, particularly the ones that cannot speak for themselves. He is the founder and co-chairman of Bahamians agitating for a referendum for free trade, and he has been credited with educating the Bahamas on a number of trade agreements and their effect on the Bahamas. A businessman, Mr. Morse is the managing director of Dominion Management Services Limited, an investment fund administrator, managing director of Omnitex Management Limited, managing partner of Colonel's Chambers Law Firm, and he's also the founder and chairman of Wisdom Institute for Children and God Little One Elementary School in Nassau. Mr. Morse is a member of the International Tax Planners Association and is involved significantly in international financial services. There's so much we can talk about Mr. Morse, and I've just kind of condensed this so that we can just get him on. So I want you to just put your hands together and welcome Mr. Attorney Paul Morse.
Thank you very much. It's always good to be in this place in Freeport. I have so many friends here. I'm saying some already tonight. But tonight I want to speak to you on the WTO and to really shed some light about it so that you can have some understanding of what is being required, what is being expected of you by this current administration. The WTO is supposedly a rule-based organization to organize global trade. The Bahamas initiated the application to join some 18 years ago, and has ratcheted up the application by seeking to have access by June of 2020. They have appointed Tobago Line as the chief negotiator for this process. The WTO was established in 1995, almost 25 years ago. If you can please take your mind back to 1995, think about how the internet was just coming on stream. Think about how you imported goods into the country. Much has changed since then, especially with the advent of the internet, and how you can order online from virtually any country in the world and have those goods delivered to your doorsteps. Well, guess what? The WTO has not changed during this period, and its failure to change is seen in the current trade war between the United States and China. So the question is, why then should we as a nation seek to join this organization that has failed to keep up with the changing world? The WTO is so much more than trade. It seeks to bind your nation to accept its rules, even if it means repealing or replacing your own laws. An example of this is that retail in this country has been reserved for Bahamians. Well, if the Bahamas joins the WTO, others from the other 164 nations that make up the WTO will be at liberty to come into the country and set up retail operations. The The same is true of taxi cab and public transportation drivers. What is disconcerting about this is that for a long time, and certainly all of my life, Bahamians have had the darndest time trying or seeking to get capital in this country to organize and operate their business properly. And to the extent that the capital they got, it was very expensive, especially when compared to the rest of the world. This means that to permit the retail operators and taxi cab and public transportation drivers to come in and compete with you, they would have an immediate advantage over you. This makes no sense to me, and it further puts us at a disadvantage. In the WTO, this is called national treatment. This means you must treat the foreigner the same way you treat your citizens. It means that if there was a policy to give Bahamians crown land, they would have to give the foreigners crown land as well. This is silly as it diminishes the value of citizenship, meaning that being a Bahamian gives you no special distinction other than to vote in the general election. And trust me, that is no distinction to me, because when one votes, he gets this kind of government who see the decision to join the WTO as their choice alone and will not find out from you, the citizens, what you want. The WTO requires that this country accepts their dispute tribunal mechanism as the only tribunal of fact on WTO matters. In other words, signing on to this agreement means that no one can no longer use the Supreme Court to hear matters concerning the WTO. This has been preserved strictly for the WTO. In my mind, this would be unconstitutional for such a removal of the court, which has inherent jurisdiction to hear all matters related to the Bahamas. Thus, the WTO tribunal does not work for the members that it currently has. The United States has gone on record to say and to lay out how it has lost many hearings at the tribunal and is now taking actions into its own hands by sanctioning fellow member states by applying duties on the goods that come into that country. You'll recall how Antigua brought a case against the United States in the WTO, and they actually won. Well, the United States promptly ignored that ruling, and today still ignores it, and the WTO is impotent to force them to comply, telling Antigua that they should sanction the United States by imposing duty on the goods coming into that country. Well, that has not happened because it will be the citizens of Antigua that will pay, not the United States. That is such a joke. The Bahamas is not much different from Antigua and would have the same problems if such a situation arises. We must reject the WTO. I should point out that the Bahamas remains the only country outside of the WTO in this hemisphere. And I say with good reason. Let's compare some countries as Barbados, Jamaica, and Haiti, all joined from the onset of the WTO in 1995. Yet their economies cannot compare to that of the Bahamas, where we have to duplicate and replicate airports and clinics over multiple islands, where we have had large projects such as Atlantis and more recently Bahama touristic developments. We have had Disney and most recently Royal Caribbean that is scheduled to complete a cruise port right here in Freeport. Now Jamaica and Barbados and Haiti, and I dare say all of the other Caribbean nations, could not get those to happen there, and they are already a part of the WTO. The reason I think this is that God has blessed us to sit on the shore of the greatest economy in the history of this world. So it is our vocation that I'm sure you understand. Recently, the Chamber of Commerce in Nassau paid for a report to be done on the WTO by Oxford Economics. The report, I must say, was very underwhelming, as it started off on the wrong premise by saying that joining the WTO would bring growth. We have not seen that growth in many countries that have actually joined. And we don't have to go far to look. We can just look at Katie's and Claire view. But the report did say that we have high wages here, meaning that it is a detriment to have such wages in the WTO. Now, this is the problem that I have with the mercenaries that drafted this report. They do not live in the Bahamas, or do they understand the high cost of living in this jurisdiction?
Exactly.
Or that we have so many Bahamians living on national minimum wage of $210 per week. What the WTO wants is low wages under the value dollar, so that their rich and wealthy friends are able to come in unfettered and exploit the country for their own benefit. We cannot permit this to happen. And I urge you to speak to your members of parliament who want them not to go against your wishes on this matter. Before I take my seat, I want to leave with you 6 reasons why we should opt out of the WTO at this time. 1, we need to take the time to develop our industries before we open up the floodgates for foreigners to come into the country and compete with us. We need to educate our people so that they are on the level to compete internationally and not simply consider those few citizens that may be in a position to benefit. 3, we cannot be a part of any agreement that seeks to deactivate our Supreme Court without a referendum saying so and amending our Constitution. 4, we need to exploit our relationship with the United States. Let's complete a trade agreement with them. Let's exploit our touristic position with them. We will find that the WTO is not necessary for us. 5, we need to permit Bahamians to own banks in this country so that we may have access to capital and have it competitively when compared internationally. And 6, this decision is too weighty for us, and we should leave it for another generation to make. After all, it will give us the time we need to develop ourselves and industries, just like the other developed countries of the WTO have done. So I want to leave you with that, and I will hear questions right after we have Dr. Gilbert.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in Freeport. This is my old stomping ground, so I feel exactly at home. When I see so many familiar faces that I grew up with and so on, I know I'm someplace where I belong, since I belong to you and you belong to me. And so it's a great pleasure, great pleasure to be here. I want to thank the organizers and my dear friend Paul Moss with excellent remarks. And I want to say at the outset that I'm in full agreement with what he has said. So I've been talking about this issue for about 21 years now, from the time the Bahamas government became enthralled with the FTAA, when there was the habit of going around saying that the FTAA represented $12 trillion worth of trade activity, but they forgot to mention that the United States was 11 trillion of that trade activity, with whom we already had a relationship. And so it's this kind of euphemism and enthusiasm that one sees that one witnesses constantly whenever some foreign entity comes to bring us their charms, and we seem to have no other response but to be seduced by what they are presenting. Steve Bannon was in Almaty, Kazakhstan, not a person that I would reference ordinarily. He is the former senior advisor to President Trump and has a set of beliefs and philosophies with which I do not concur. But he said that nationalism is the new revolutionary principle in the world, meaning that all over the world, countries, peoples of countries are shrinking, looking inward within their borders. So you see this in the United States, pushed by President Trump. In Paris, you see this, and you're not seeing the reports every day, but today was another massive riot with tear gas and so on. It looks like Lebanon or, some other rough territory. People and citizens around the world have a sense of dissatisfaction, right, with their governments. And the Bahamas really is no different. We have developed over the last 25 years a sense of political maturity, having switched parties, although in a narrow group of persons becoming prime minister, but at least the parties have been changed. And we've gotten a measure of because of the referenda that we've had, we've gotten a measure of issues and interests and things discussed in the country which had never really happened before. But Bahamians have come to recognize that they live in a very valuable country, and this country is strategically located, and a country which seems to be able to produce wealth for everyone else, it seems, but a narrow group of Bahamians and a large number of foreigners. And so Bahamians are saying, enough is enough.
That's right.
So that, for me, is an important thing. And I can tell you, I am not interested, I'm an economist, I'm not interested in any policy of any kind that does not involve Bahamian equity, Bahamian ownership, not employment, not participation, ownership. People say, well, we are not really very well experienced, well, neither are the people who came here to invest. Right. Because we have hundreds of stories of people coming here to invest, blowing up the place, stealing from Bahamians. We have an example not far away from here where some people came and invested, a lot of great stories and so on, left high and dry with people's mortgages and things like that, and there's some mechanism that they say was important. So, Bannon's statement that somehow nationalism is a new revolutionary principle, then you have another group of people saying, no, not nationalism, but patriotism. And you have another group saying, well, maybe not nationalism, not patriotism, but nativism. Nativism meaning someone connected to the soil who believes in the culture and wants to preserve that culture and so on. So such as you've seen in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Croatia, and these sorts of places, the breakup of the kingdom of Yugoslavia. So I say something else. I say not nationalism, not patriotism, not nativism, citizenship.
Yes.
Citizenship. We have to restore the value of citizenship. My brother Paul wants to refer to that. It has to mean something. Yes. And when you walk this landscape, people have to be able to point to you. There's a famous, this is a little bit of a side note, a famous in Cicero, in murder trials, Cicero was a great Roman lawyer, and he has a witness on stage, and he says, or a perpetrator on stage, and he says, so he said to you he was a Roman, and this did not stay your hand. And the guy looks at him and he said, no, he said he was Roman, and this did not stop you. Meaning that Cicero understood that when someone says, I am a Roman, everything is supposed to stop. Because being a Roman means something. And so the question that Bahamians have is, what does being Bahamian mean if we find that within our own country, we cannot live our best life? If our young people are constantly leaving because they can live a better life outside the Bahamas. That is indeed a critical problem. So, do you agree or do you disagree? Okay, this is the part where the Bahamians say now you're becoming technical. I don't really speak in those terms, agree or disagree. What I say is no case has been made. There's nothing for me to agree or disagree with because no case has been made. No case, no legitimate case has been made. There's only one question every Bahamian should have. One question. If citizenship means equity for Bahamians, if citizenship means what it meant for Cicero and being Roman, if citizenship means prosperity for Bahamians and their best life in their own country, then the only issue is what is there that the governments of the Bahamas wish to do for Bahamians that cannot be achieved without the WTO?
Exactly.
That's the only question.
Exactly.
If they can answer that question, you can decide whether or not the WTO is good for the Bahamas. Is there some vision or strategy or objective that the governments of the Bahamas have that they see as important to delivering prosperity to Bahamians and generating energy into Bahamian citizenship? And the only way to deliver that benefit is by joining WTO. If they can answer that question and demonstrate that policy, whatever it is, in the affirmative, then you've got the basis and a case can be discussed. But in all this time in discussing these issues, I have not seen or heard once in 21 years a case that seems to make sense to me. Now, I gave a lecture some weeks ago at BFM in Nassau on the WTO and the Bahamian future. And I want to read something from that lecture very quickly. And this is I was using this as an example of what you would do, how a government would approach its people to say, we have here a strategy or a mechanism that's very, very important for the future of the Bahamas, and this is the reason for joining a trade organization when exports are 7% of GDP and falling. When a government decides on a strategy that can alter the prospects of citizenship for its people, like WTO, it doesn't approach this by promoting WTO to its citizens, particularly when those citizens have experienced substantial marginalization from the benefits of prosperity in their own country. Instead, a government works with its citizens to formulate a core strategy aimed at protecting the government's capacity to facilitate its promises in its manifestos. That is democracy. Let's put it more plainly. The Bahamas belongs to its citizens. The citizens elect the government under the Constitution, and it's the duty of that government, the Bahamas government, to ensure that the citizens, the Bahamians, benefits from its actions, from the country's structure, its resources and operations. The government has no power under our Constitution to act on its own volition unless it is acting in a manner demonstrably for the peace, order, and good governance of the Bahamas. So says the Bahamas Constitution, Article 52.1. The government in our constitutional democracy are not decision makers. They represent and are bound legally to represent the wishes of the people, whatever members of the government feel. Therefore, when considering organizations like WTO, it is the duty of the Bahamas government to seek and know and understand the needs and wishes of its citizens. It is not to approach its people by defining to them the WTO as if defining the WTO is a strategy. It is not for them to promote the WTO as if promoting the WTO is a strategy, as if the value is in the WTO rather than the strategy that would make the WTO necessary for them. It is not to appeal to the citizens by telling the citizens that everyone else has joined. All of us Bahamians know that our parents, this is a rule against an essential principle our parents have taught. Just because other people are doing it, you won't get to do it, not in this house. So if the people have another vision of themselves and refuse to join an organization out of a defined sense of themselves, that they have another idea of their future possibility, it is the government's duty to lay before them all the alternatives, presented equally without prejudice, and allow the people of the Bahamas to decide. Suppose the government in its wisdom says, we're trying an initiative which is to fulfill our duty to Bahamians. And let's say this initiative is solar panel manufacturing. We were talking about this today in the Bahamas. Why would you want that? One, solar panels have fallen in price, so they're very cheap. Number two, you have 100 million people retiring in the United States. We know that 17% of them are going to move to the southern United States where the sun is. And we also know that that means that cheaper energy becomes very, very important. So the Bahamas government says, I see a once-in-a-generation opportunity there for us to leverage that market and become the dominant players in that market. So that it comes to, goes to China and says, listen, bring one of your major universities, Thompson or one of them, to Freeport. We will develop engineers and training and so you see, it's not just selling. It's not just becoming consumers. It has an embedded development within the country to the benefit of Bahamians. Then you go to the United States, to municipalities and so on, and negotiate and that sort of thing. And then at the main point when you've got the idea all boxed and ready to go, someone puts their hands up and say, we have a problem. You have to join the WTO to take advantage of this. Then you have a decision to make. Because there's a benefit there for you, you have to ask whether that's the benefit you want. That's how you approach your country when asking them to take on the obligations for the WTO, in spite of all the evidence of the difficulties that developing countries have had under the WTO. So I discussed that at that BFM lecture. And one of the things I laid out to them, a few things I laid out to them in that lecture. Number one, WTO is basically FDI on steroids with no constraints, right? So that's what MFN is about. But here's the thing. The Bahamas already has a higher share of GDP, of FDI as a share of GDP than every other WTO member in the Caribbean. I wonder if you understand what that means. You're going into something that's going to promote FDI, you say, all right, but we already have, outside of the WTO, a higher share of our GDP as FDI than any other CARICOM WTO member. So that's an issue. Number two, the FDI for jobs model is dead. It's dead. We've been running that for 44 years. FDI for jobs. So we keep saying we need foreign investors to create jobs for our people and so on. It's a dead model. Why? Take hotels. You have hotels now. Remember every young man had this little job. He could get room service, taking the coffee to the room at night and so on. That's dead. That's gone forever. Nobody does that anymore. You have espresso machines in the room now, so you don't need him. At the W Hotel or the Mandarin Oriental, the person who was hired to take your order for in-room dining, that's gone. There's an iPad in your room. You just touch what you want. There are even pictures of the food. You don't have to learn anything anymore. Just touch the picture that you want, hit send, and half an hour later your food comes out. So you don't need that person anymore. Eventually, you're not going to have check-in agents. You're going to book your hotel room. You're going to receive a code. When you get to the hotel room, put in the code, put your fingerprint, and that'll be you. So what are we selling to our people? In the world where animation is taking over jobs, how do you sell people that FDI for jobs is a good model? There's another problem. A a critical problem. In my view, FDI is bad for our reserve position. And this is one of the things I was shocked. The report got it completely wrong. All right? They talk about the government shortfall and how that may disturb the peg. That's the wrong way of thinking about the trustee on this. And I'll explain it to you. When you get a foreign investor into the Bahamas, imagine it's $1 billion investment. Now, there may be some period of time where they have to swing that money through the Bahamas banking system, but it doesn't remain. So eventually they park that money overseas. Because if you have US dollars, why don't you bring it into a system if you can borrow money within the system? So you go to Scotiabank's wealth management services in North Carolina or Royal Bank's wealth management in LA or someplace like that. You deposit it there. You come to the Bahamas and you borrow B dollars. And you mobilize your development using B dollars. You say, okay, you use B dollars for that, but surely, absolutely, when you start to run the place and you start to do your group, that's when you'll get the US dollars. No, not really. Because what's going to happen is all your procurement is being done outside the country. Why would you bring your money into the country, all right, when your procurement is going to be outside? So you do all that outside the country. Then it comes time for you to hire staff, you get another rollover, overdraft, or something like that, and you have your operations budget, all of $B, and you run that. So you say, no, when the guests book, that's when you'll get the money. No, that money goes to credit card companies in New Jersey and Fort Lauderdale. It never ever comes to the Bahamas. But you know what happens? You have these investment dollars, very few of them which actually come to the country. But the employment expands the number of people drawing down the reserves. Because if you're being paid in B dollars, how do you get goods, services, things you need from Florida and so on? You draw down on the reserves to receive that. So what's happening? You have a drawdown rate that's faster than your replenishment rate. Your investment model contributes very little to your replenishment rate for your reserves, while drawing down on your reserves for people shopping and getting goods and services abroad. So every time you go on Amazon, you're spending US currency. US currency that you're not paid, you're paid in B dollars. All right? And so you're creating stress for the reserve. So we have a reserve position that involves a significant portion of borrowed funds. Borrowed funds. Now, in my view, the reserve should be 50% of GDP. That's $6 billion. In my view, that should be the reserve position. There's only one way to get that. You have to invest in and through banks. There's no other way. One of the examples in the Oxford Economics Report is they talked about the difference between cruise tourist expenditure and overnight tourists. The cruises were $99. St. Martin is the highest with $191. But overnight is $1,500. So if you have an area like, let's just say, someplace nobody's thought about recently, like Lighthouse Point, right? And you talk about Lighthouse Point. So you're going to give a cruise proposition to Lighthouse Point to get $99 when you could have invested in boutique Bahamian hotels owned by Bahamians in that area. So you see, this becomes a wealth transfer out of the country.
Yes.
It becomes a wealth transfer out of the country. And these are very, very significant concerns. So I did address that at that meeting as well. Now, there are those who say, well, listen, the sweet thing, we have no strategy, okay, we did that. We have no vision, we did that. But man, you get this wonderful dispute resolution mechanism under the WTO. That's what we should want, because when we get into trade disputes, we can go to this mechanism. Okay, so you get into a trade dispute with the United States, let's say, right? Monsanto wants to come and do seed culture development in Andros. We say no. all right? Because we don't want Frankenstein seeds, all right, that can tell you that they're not going to grow for you unless you pay Monsanto. We don't want those seeds. And they can go and lobby the U.S. government, who doesn't care one way or the other. That senator or congressman just wants to get his or her check from Monsanto. So they slip that into a farm bill, right? A tariff on the Bahamas or some penalty on the Bahamas and so on. And what can we do? Oil. We're in the WTO. So we can do what China has done. We'll put sanctions on the United States and ban all Americans from coming here. That's not really a good idea. Right? That's not really a good idea. What does that mean? There is no equilibrium, no reciprocity built into our relationship because they are giants and we are little pushets.
Yes.
And little pushets can't join organizations that belong to giants. Remember that terrible thing that Michael Jordan did to Muggsy Bogues? Muggsy Bogues was sort of 5'1", Jordan is 6'7", and 3 is, basketball player. When Muggsy Bogues came to guard him, he said, "Where's the rest of you?" Right? Very cruel, but the reality of life. The U.S., when we come to stand toe-to-toe with them, their thing is, "Well, where's the rest of you?" Right? We can send all the taxi drivers in Boca Raton to invade the Bahamas and there's nothing you can do. So countries have to look at themselves at the reality of their capacities. And they cannot just join organizations on the basis that it's a good thing to join that everybody is joining and reject the obvious values staring them right in the face. That we are the only ones in the Western Hemisphere has not joined, and we are in a better position than most. So if that's the case, why aren't we trying to figure out how we can leverage that rather than joining everyone? All the Caribbean brothers are in WTO. Every one of them economic basket cases.
That's the truth.
Every one of them. So we have to think of a strategy that's better for us. Now here's what's happening. The Uruguay round of the WTO did something, and I discussed this in the last lecture, and I sent a copy of the lecture. You can send it around to people if they'd like to read it. I don't go deeply into it because that was a very technical point, and I want to open up questions with my colleague, Mark. And one of the things that we discussed is the Uruguay round, something happened. Exhausted with the constant back and forth, they just jammed everything into it and told everybody you have to sign. So when the door on the current round of negotiations opened up, everyone, as my brother Maurice Linton says, ran for the tall grass. So countries started doing bilateral agreements and regional trade agreements.
Right.
One country nearby us that stole our leadership in tourism is Dominican Republic. And the Dominican Republic agrees with everything that happens in WTO. Every time somebody says yes, of course, yes, certainly. But you know what? The Dominican Republic uses the free trade zone exemption in WTO to get out of every obligation under WTO. It has more free trade zones than any country in the world. They have a rule in the free trade zone that 80% of any investment and employment must be Dominican. Must be Dominican. All right? They have even single buildings that are free trade zones. Just to make sure it's in Dominican hands.
That's good.
So you see, that's a country that says, we can't fight the giant. But we're going to use, we read the fine print, the parts with no pictures, and we are going to develop a strategy that benefits us. That's citizenship. That's giving value and prominence to citizenship.
Yes.
So these free trade zones have become their way. The door round cannot succeed because countries in their bilateral arrangements, have lowered their tariffs below the effective rate of the WTO negotiations. So their tariff rates are actually lower in their bilateral trade agreements than what they negotiated at the WTO. So countries have gone, so countries are coming to our position. So essentially, we operate like a free trade zone, or as if we have bilaterals with other countries. All right, we negotiate. So when a company comes, we negotiate with them very badly because we give away concessions rather than exchange concessions, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get a value back for it. All right, but we are doing those negotiations. The other thing, and Brother Paul Moss mentioned it, is the constitutionality. I am of the view, and I had this discussion with some of my lawyer colleagues, that the Bahamas may not be constitutionally in a position to complete such an agreement. Because the Bahamas Constitution is unique in the proposition that it defines specifically the role of Parliament. And the Bahamas government has no power to alienate its power to another entity, like the WTO. And if you look at the example, the Canadian Constitution does not have this provision. So when Canada tried to protect its environment by enacting a set of laws called the Canada Environment Protection Act, the United States immediately hammered them through the WTO. And they stepped off. The Bahamas is in a unique position that the U.S. has no such interest in us. Because we export U.S. dollars. And that's our main industry, right? That gambling. So the United States has no such interest in us. So strategically, we are in a unique position to concern ourselves with our own prosperity. We are in a unique position. Strategically, because of our location, the U.S. highest level interest in the Bahamas is national security, not trade. And that national security interest gives us a strategic set of options to leverage U.S. interests and comfort in national security in exchange for Bahamian prosperity. Why aren't we thinking about those things? That's very, very important. The final thing is gentrification. A young Bahamian, Peter Blair, who's a professor at Harvard University, economics professor, he gave a talk in Nassau about the Movable Properties Act and about Bahamian prosperity. And you should read that they were particularly pages 12 and 13, the opening sentence and the conclusion. All right? It's on his, let's look up Peter Blair, it's on his website. You can look it up, and there's a link in my paper that could be sent around by WhatsApp group. And the reason that, I won't go into it deeply, but the reason that paper is important, the general reason that you should be familiar with, is that one of the dangers of going in the direction of the WTO is the gentrification of the entire Bahamas. So here you have a country with the sort of real estate that people die to own. And if you open up the country completely, as we have partly done by removing the Movable Properties Act, what you're going to do and what you risk doing, when there's a demand in the United States for retirement property and so on, is pricing Bahamians completely out of their country. That is a danger. And so that is something with which we have to be deeply concerned. I will come now to my general conclusions, and we open up for questions. In my view, the alternative to the WTO, which is something the Oxford Economics Report did not consider. So in addition to it produced excellent anatomical statistics about the Bahamas. But our dear brother Felix Stubbs had already done that in the National Development Report. But you know I have it. Every 5 or 10 years, we have a new 500-page report that we put on the shelf to sleep after someone has done the work on it. So Oxford Economics really sort of leveraged on to what Brother Felix Stubbs had already done. And the other thing, one of the other anomalies in the report, one raised by Paul Moss, was there was a lot of IMF speak, like the Bahamas is very expensive. Wages are too high and therefore uncompetitive. Right? And then there's risk to the peg. So what's that little troika doing right there? That's saying that, hey, you got to reduce wages. And what is the WTO? What is, if you read Mead's paper, the fellow who won the 1977 Nobel Prize for the paper on international trade, one of the things you'll see is that the objective in part was, one of the objectives was to use the WTO to control interest groups in the domestic setting. So, for instance, if you have unions, one of the ways to control it is to say, listen, it's out of our hands. I mean, we signed on to this thing and it brings benefits, but basically you don't have the rights you did have. Right? Because we haven't built a model like Germany, where unions and management have a unique relationship where they see themselves as partners in economic development. We haven't done that. So under the circumstances, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to succeed. And so that the report harps on that. It does another interesting thing. It says that one of the problems in the Bahamian economic model is that the banks are not lending. Now it says that. Yes. Then it says, 4 pages later, the reason for the fall in the construction industry is the lack of FDI. But how does that make sense? As if Bahamians can't borrow money and construct things? Is that really proper logic? That the reason that the construction industry is stagnant is because of a lack of FDI when you're also admitting that the banks aren't lending money? It seems to me that the problem with the fall in construction is the banks aren't lending money.
Yes. Not
the problem of FDI. So the report has some of these anomalies which are open to profound and fundamental questions. But overall, the report never considers an alternative. But it does do something very important. For 21 years now, I and others have said, listen, if you feel you need to join the WTO, and most political parties, major political parties, have signed on this, make no mistake. If you feel you need to join the WTO, I have argued, wait 3 to 5 years. In that 3 to 5 years, develop a sovereign fund in which you transfer significant and strategic assets of the Bahamas to the Bahamian people.
Ugly.
awesome.
Right.
To the Bahamian people. So that, remember, so I give you an example in Singapore and Norway. In Singapore, the government owns 90% of all land. They own 87% of all rental property. But it's not the government. They don't own the way we own, so we used to own BTC, which is some minister sitting up there, So 1 minute he's unemployed, gets elected, and suddenly, you're running, BTC. It's a very interesting thing. I'm not picking on anybody who thinks about this thing. No, I'm not picking on anybody. So I'm saying that that's the formula. So Singapore, faced with developing itself, said, wait a minute, we are an entrepreneur. We trade, just like Singapore. So Singapore is one of the 11 countries like the Bahamas, which is in direct proximity to a major global power. So like Mauritius is for India, right? Botswana is for South Africa, Djibouti is for Ethiopia, like that. All right. So Singapore says, we are going to go into warehousing so more economic activity takes place. We don't just have pass-through shipping. More economic activity takes place in Singapore. But you know what Singapore did? Its elementary school textbooks were changed to discuss the civics and economics of Singapore as being in warehousing. Then they did something else. They asked themselves another question. We want to develop fast, so should we invest in Singaporean business people and allow them to do development, or should we get foreign investors. So they said, okay, you want to go very fast. So 3 or 4 weeks ago to its citizens. Norway did a similar thing, but Norway is even more intense. What it said was, we have all these oil revenues, so we're not going to allow the profits from those oil revenues to come into the country. We're going to take 4% so we pay for health and education and beautification of the environment and turn Norway into a garden. We're going to do that. The rest of the money we're going to put in a sovereign wealth fund in the name of the people of Norway. That fund today is $1.2 trillion, which makes the 5 million Norwegians, everyone a millionaire. Right? Now, that's not the sweet part. The sweet part is, about 10 weeks ago, they paid out $131 billion to their 5 million citizens. About $27,000 per citizen, sometimes 3 or 4 people in one household. That's not your salary. That's not your pension. That's your profit. So citizenship in Norway seems to have a value. And how do we create that value for ourselves? And this is my last point. We know that there are, I said before, 100 million retirees in the United States over the next 35 years. If we got 1,000 of them, the Turks and Caicos have a retirement plan which is a permanent residency, PRC, without the right to work, and the fee is $1.5 million. That's what you have to pay to get this residency in Turks and Caicos. Now here's the thing, it's interesting. You get 1,000 people, that's $1.5 billion. Do you think, if we decided all these people in here in the Bahamas who've been in hospitality and tourism and so on, people who've done landscaping and that sort of thing, imagine again, let's say Lighthouse Point, let's say you decided that was going to be, instead of a Disney Emporium, it was going to be a retirement zone, and it was going to be a carbon neutral, green retirement zone. And it's $1,500. And this is the PRC, the land and house package together, right? So imagine you did that instead. What would that require? It would require technology, very, very high tech. So you basically induce a technology industry. It would require green and climate saving, systems and technologies and so on, because those people aren't coming to retire to the Bahamas, to a natural paradise, to find it as filthy as the places where they came from. So the great priorities for the Bahamas, it seems to me, is that in economics, you often look around for where the demand is coming from and how much you have to invest in generating that demand. In this case, you have to invest nothing. Zero. That is unique in economic history. It is because of proximity and because of the topology and climate that we enjoy. We didn't create. So we didn't create the climate in the Bahamas, the location, so God created that, so you didn't have any investment in that. You don't have to create the demand because those people want to come here and there's proximity. So you don't have to invest in that. So what is it that you have to do? Make up your mind, open your eyes, see the blessing before you, and execute upon it.
It's good.
That is it. That is all we are required to do. Turn our eyes away from these things which these large countries have as their interests, which the U.S., our major interest, does not require of us, and turn our attention to those things which are already set, the table is already set for us. And if we are able to achieve that, one of the things you're going to have to do is transition the Bahamas from a rulership So one of the things that Norway did, that Estonia did, is transition governing from rulership to government as a service.
Amen.
So rather than government as control, as rulership, government as a service. Government as a service. And it turns out that exactly what retirees need is what Bahamians need. Clean environment, efficient services, responsive government, all right? Accountability, efficiency, transparency. And that's what's required, that's what technology delivers. An e-government platform delivers that. So if we were working on the right things, we would be looking at this opportunity from the north to get people here. We would be looking at the sort of environment we're inviting them to and say to ourselves that we have abused ourselves these many years not creating the sort of environment that we should have been enjoying. So let's do that now for ourselves and for our new guests. And in order to maximize that, you have to have e-government and an electronic platform that will deliver those services efficiently, transparently, and where there's a significant degree of accountability. And if we did that, we would have a bright Bahamian future indeed, in which citizenship will be a value. Thank you.
Wasn't that a fantastic presentation? Amazing. Now we're going to enter into our time of questions and answers. But I just need to set down just one ground rule. We need you to ask questions, not to come and make statements. Because what we want to do in the time that we have is to draw out as much as we can get information from Attorney Paul Morse and Professor Gilbert Morris. So if you have questions, come. Ask your questions so that our presenters can answer them. So we're going to pass around a mic for all those that have questions. And when you ask your question, please state at the beginning who you want to, if you have a preference, or if you just want to ask a question and leave it up to the presenter to decide who will answer it. So Wayne will have the mic, and put up your hands, and we got right here, we got Ms. Bartlett right here in front from the DNA. It's good to have you with us. All right.
All right. Probably anyone can answer this question because I believe that the Bahamas is not ready for WTO. So how do we simply stop WTO? And can we do it constitutionally? That's it.
Hello, Lisa. How are you doing there?
Good. It's Julia now.
Great to see you. One of the problems in our democracy is that over the decades, we inherited a system that we never tried to reform
Pointing to the
or
person
make
asking
more
the question.
participatory
And then
for
the person.
Bahamians.
All right, so move it back and forth.
And in order to stop something like the WTO, there may be a constitutional challenge that's possible. It has to be examined and researched. These are not easy matters which lend themselves to the audience of the court. But it may be possible because of the unique nature of our Constitution. But what is more important is that the people of this country have to demonstrate that they have the capacity to organize themselves, not on emotional grounds, not attacking people, not calling people names, but organize themselves and lay out a set of principles based on the Constitution, based on the structure of our democracy, based on the rights of the citizen, based on setting out an alternative model, and convince the people of this country, fellow Bahamians, that that is the path to take. That is what people do in sophisticated countries. You look at a place like Switzerland. You can't really, no government in Switzerland can really impose anything on that population. they make a determination of this, what is in their best interest, and they make the decision. When President Trump was inaugurated, he eliminated all the subsidies for a number of green energy proposals for the environment. The people of Norway took a vote and decided that their sovereign wealth fund should invest and save those projects. In the United States, 5 million people deciding for 350 million people what is the right thing. So the question, but they are organized. They have organized themselves. Their self-understanding is that they have the power to do good in the world. And that's what they're here for. To have a self-understanding, even for our own benefit and prosperity. That is the question. So we're not going to get away with what we are used to doing, which is getting mad and attacking people and PLP and that and so on. We're going, for the first time in our history, to really have to lay out a credible agenda and find a mechanism through the churches, whether organizations, to get the image to buy in, listen to their disagreements and arguments, and formulate an agenda and then present that to the country.
Good evening, officers. I have a few questions to ask. Both parties can answer. What does the Bahamas to gain joining the World Trade Organization or to lose? The question is, we have a lot of resources in the Bahamas that are untapped, especially our blue economy. What is this going to do for our blue economy? And our fishing industry is over $4 billion or so many billions of dollars. What is the World Trade Organization going to do so that the Indians get a fair share? And the last one is the World Trade Organization going to do for us, for the government, or any other thing they can do for us in order to bring us to a point where we can be profitable in the Bahamas, have something from what we have. That's it.
I think you asked 3 questions. The first one was, what does the Bahamas have to gain or lose by joining the World Trade Organization? The reality is this: the World Trade Organization requires you right now to change laws that you have become accustomed to, and change your economy that you have become accustomed to. In other words, once you join this organization, every part or every member of the organization has the same right, unfettered right, to come into your country and to do exactly what you're doing. And when they do that, they do so from a position of strength, having regard for their access to capital that you do not have. You don't have it here, even though they have these Canadian banks around it. You do not have the access that international people do. And therefore, that puts you immediately at a disadvantage. So a few years ago, I did a transaction for a client who was an international guy who purchased a home for $600,000. And he took a mortgage by, I think it was Royal Bank of Canada. And the interest rate that he was charged on borrowing US dollars was 1%. Now you can juxtapose that to yourself. When you get a mortgage from any one of these Canadian banks, what your interest rate would be. And so that person is now coming to your country and getting a mortgage from your bank at a lower rate than you can get it. And so that's what you will gain by, or lose by joining World Trade Organization.
One more question. Does the government have a right?
Does the government have a right to bring the World Trade Organization on Bahamian people, or do they have to bring a referendum?
Well, we say that a referendum is necessary, particularly when one really examines what the World Trade Organization is about. The World Trade Organization speaks about this dispute mechanism, whereby everything that deals with any dispute that comes up must be dealt with within that organization. You cannot go to your Supreme Court and have it to be dealt with. And we know the Constitution is very clear that the Supreme Court has inherent jurisdiction to hear any and all matters pertaining to the Bahamas. And so for the government to go and agree to do something like that, it would remove the Supreme Court, which is part of the Constitution, to do so. And in order to do that, it must be an amendment of the Constitution by the citizens of the country, and that's through a referendum. But if they don't do it, then I believe that the legal case will exist. And we have a constitutional scholar here, lawyer here, Mary Morris Clinton. I'm sure that he will find this more, but I believe it will exist for us to turn that around and to make sure that they go according to the Constitution.
Well, there's one more point on that. Under the WTO, there's something called the government procurement agreement, and the procurement agreement means that you pay taxes, and the government uses a share of those taxes to assign contracts for various infrastructure projects and other government projects and so on. Under the equal treatment rules, an individual can come from abroad as a member of the from a country that's a member of the WTO, and they have an equal right to a government contract as you do. Now think about that. So here you are, you're paying taxes in this country, right? Your government is using a share of the taxes you pay to carry out capital projects in the country. A person comes from abroad with better credit than you, more history, more experience because of the country that they come from. And that history and that experience in his country is more amenable to the banks in your country and more amenable to the government agencies deciding to whom to give the contract. So you're sitting there in the room with your national experience, your national statistics and records, and so personal statistics and records, and so on. And that person sitting there with their international, records and systems, and they are going to get a share of your tax dollars to finance the contract that they receive. And if that contract overruns or there are new costs, you will continue to pay taxes for that person's contract. Now, I cannot believe that there's any value in any citizenship when that takes place. You see my point? Now, there's a second point, and I'm sure that also talk about this. Those who insist on the WTO and agree with the WTO will say, well, look, you all talk about how the WTO, all the elements of the WTO, but you haven't recognized that we have put a set of reservations, we've reserved a set of areas where they cannot touch. Jamaica did the same thing. The day after they made their ascension, the U.S. bombed on them and made them change those rules. That's one. Number two, the same skill, diligence, that was necessary for us to save the financial services industry is the same skill and diligence that will be required to protect these reserve categories. And I will ask you, will you hold your breath for what we've achieved in trying to save the financial services industry and say that suddenly the government's going to know how to do that in the terms of the WTO?
No. Impossible.
And the reserve period is only for a period of 5 years. So it has an expiration date. That means that after 5 years it goes away, and then whatever was prohibited is allowed.
Good night. Dr. Morris. Mr. Morse. Very great presentation. Appreciate that. But I want where are we with this, with the WTO, with respect to signing off on this? Are we near the point to sign off on this WTO? Because I know Chicago is all around the place having its town hall meetings and everything. And I want to find exactly what's our position, where are we at this particular point? Are we prepared to sign off on this after Chicago finishes town hall meetings around the country or not? I think I need to know that, because getting back to somebody said earlier that we need to have a referendum. I think the people should decide this. I don't know how we're going to go about this, whether the government is going to make the decision itself, or whether we have to demand that we have a referendum on the WTO, because I'm sure it will be rejected. I think that's what we want. But let's tell me exactly where we are at this particular point.
Yes, sir.
With the WTO.
Ready to go, Brad.
Well, right now, the chief negotiator is supposedly negotiating the position of the Bahamas with other members of the World Trade Organization. They're supposed to wrap that up by December of this year, with the hope of having the ministers of the WTO to agree in June of 2020 whether they would accept it. And if they accept it, I suppose that period they would then sign on and join the World Trade Organization. I do agree with you that it is so fundamental that this requires a referendum. It reminds me of a case where Jamaica was seeking to abolish the Privy Council from as being final court of appeal of Jamaica. And what they did was something very similar to what is going on today. They just ignored the people, ignored the Constitution, and just simply dropped them. Of course, there was a group there that took that matter to court, and the Privy Council held that you can't do it, you have to do it through a referendum. So hopefully, if they continue on this track they're on, I'm sure this is going to be engaged to put a stop to this nonsense.
There is in the lecture that I sent to Pastor Eddie, there's a flow chart from the WTO website, the Bahamas states, that shows in blue where the Bahamas has gotten to so far, and gray how far it has to go. And there are 6 main steps, but one of the steps that's very important to me, was something called the draft agreement, that you had to do a draft trade agreement. So you pick a country like the United States that's your main trading partner, you do a comprehensive agreement what that trade agreement would look like, and then all the other countries would adopt that as part of the formula. But we haven't really done that, because that would have required a massive public campaign done properly, and we would have been able to analyze whether or not the master trade agreement, draft trade agreement that we would put out was one that was in the best interest of the Bahamas. So that's another. So I agree with referendum. The problem that I have again is that in all the referendums we've had, all the various political parties, both political parties, have behaved miserably in terms of educating the people of the Bahamas and providing a fair standard. It is not the role of the government to advocate a position in a referendum. The government has to outsource the referendum to an independent body, and they are to provide resources for people who are for and against, and have the sort of public forum that reflects respect for democracy.
Good evening. Excellent presentation, and you confirmed that this is not what we need right now. But can the members of parliament stop this, since we voted them in to represent the people?
That's a great question, and I was talking to a dear friend about that last night. One of the problems that you see, and it happens in both parties. So you've had members of parliament who are not ministers who have been fired for disagreeing with government's position. So, and that's happened in both administrations. When you see that, it must mean that there's no representative nexus in parliament. The prime minister is the king. And the prime minister tells everyone in parliament, in his party or her party, what to do. And if they don't do it, they feel the wrath of the prime minister. So that would indicate that the only representation that the people have might be the opposition. But in this case, the opposition is neutral in many respects, and the opposition agrees with the government position, and the opposition behaves that way when they are in power. So this is a situation where that's why we said this is going to take a greater sort of sense of ourselves and sense of democracy as citizens than anything in the history of our country. Because the Bahamian people are going to have to say, A, we want a referendum, B, we will not try to bamboozle us in the education period of this referendum by promoting a particular position. We will not have that. You will do it on an important basis, and we demand a reflection also on the representative responsibilities of members of parliament. Because we feel certain that members of parliament should have reflected their constituencies' views, whatever the prime minister wishes. Right? And not any particular prime minister, but all prime ministers of the Bahamas. So that's an excellent question that has to do with democracy and ensuring that people don't just issue things like, say we're going to have a referendum, and it's a referendum name only, but the substance of the referendum remains missing from the rule of democracy.
Professor Morris, on the government contracts, if the Bahamas was to ascend to the World Trade Organization, would I as a Bahamian able to go to another country and do the same thing as far as this family?
That's a good question. So this is the reciprocity feature of the WTO. So the right is that if we join the WTO and someone comes from a WTO member country and receives government contracts in the Bahamas, we should be able to go to their country and gain government contracts as well. The question is, in our country, do you have the requisite, you need insurance, you need financial capacity, you need sort of bank references and so on. So are you going to be able to compete? So my point is, yes, in theory, you can go to another country and you can compete. But is that really going to happen? There was a group of people when I had arrived in America who had discussed with me the possibility of becoming a judge in the United States. And no sooner than that word had gotten out, there were people there who made it very plain to me, okay, you may be black, but there's only so many positions for blacks, and it ain't yours. So my point is, the reality of these things are not so simple, and you don't put your country in this position for a theoretical possibility. You see my point? Mm-hmm. Now, if the Bahamas government had spent years and years sort of softening the United States government, softening the Canadian government, developing these linkages and so on, and we had a real proposition of these things, I can see that. But to say that you and Shaq will have the same right to a particular benefit, but both of you have to compete against each other to hit a shot, to make a shot in the basket, your chances are very slim. Yes, no, I understand that. I understand. Oh, you will have the opportunity to do things in other countries and so on, but you have no capacity, you have no credit, you have no background or anything like that. How are you, what are you going to do it with? What are you going to do with it? That's the problem that we have.
We were informed of a lot of things about this WTO. Now, what I would like to ask is, how soon and what do we need to do to get started to express this pressure or opposition to not wanting the WTO?
It's 31 hours.
What do we do and where can we get some help? Because we don't want to leave here tonight after all these discussions and just go home and fold our arms.
I believe the starting point is to really speak to your member of parliament, or the members of parliament here around, and certainly to organize yourself so that if they do not hear you, they will feel you. That is to say that you have to, if it means taking the streets, that's what you have to do, because when you look at this country, nothing has really happened without that. Going to the streets and really taking matters into your hands that way. But you have to organize yourself that way as speaking members of parliament. That's the starting point.
What about the petition, right?
I know the gentleman here said that we shouldn't ask, shouldn't make a statement. I have to make a statement and rely directly to what the lady is saying. And right now, I think it is the responsibility of the labor movement, employers and employees, right, to start a campaign, right? It may cost us a few dollars from the labor movement to start a campaign to, like the lady was saying, do some commercials, right? But I just walk into the red, right? Because basically you were saying the thing I'm saying. What I'm saying is do some commercials, do some advertisements to really explain to the Bahamian people, because the only thing we understand is when we see it out there, right? That how this is going to affect us. And right now, there's no other way, because the powers that be, that is the intentions, right? And the only way is one, educate people, right? And two, if you want to stop it, you know how to make it clear to people by way of commercials or whatever, to let them know that's where we're going. Thank you for letting off the mic.
No, we didn't cut it off.
Let me ask.
What is going to? I think this is a very good point. But again, one of the things we have to do is make sure, we have to make. When we had in Turks and Caicos, the British tried to impose that. When they came to me, they said, "Well, we should attack." And there's a rule for that. My point is, before you do anything, remember, the British have been managing people for 1,000 years. You have to lay out a case, you have to show business, and you have to show, as you said, employees, how this will impact them. You have to make a real case so that the people in the society have the data, and it doesn't have to be complex economic data, but they have a sensible argument that they can make, so that you're not just depending on your emotional feeling to oppose the action. You can actually lay out, say, a 10 or 12-point plan, and you can explain each of those points, and then you have an alternative, but not just a pie in the sky alternative, an actual practical alternative that the Bahamas could engage in that would be better for our Bahamian future. I always say, in talking to one of the leading FNMs, I said, so you guys have said that in 1992 you said the PLB is corrupt, we need to change the government. Should have been corrupt all the while. So you're going to do the WTO. So your political philosophy is that the people of the Bahamas have been denied their rightful access to resources and prosperity and all this. So whether you're right or wrong, that's your argument. Why would you then go and tell those people who have been hurt by all those years of denial that now that our friends are wealthy, you now compete with the rest of the world, right? You now we're going to open the country up and you compete with the rest of the world. If you feel that they've been shortchanged by previous governments, should you reestablish them and ensure that they have access to resources and so on, rather than just tearing open the country to the rest of the world and exacerbating their position? So the average Bahamian has to be able to make that argument. When you go to Switzerland, the average, your 12-year-old can make the essential arguments about why their country is organized the way it is. We can't say we love the Bahamas just loving oil fish. You cannot say that we just love the Bahamas because of the beaches and all that sort of thing, because we're cool with each other. We have to love the Bahamas because the criteria and the benefit, the value of citizenship is known and understood by every Bahamian. That is essentially important.
Good evening. I'd like to know if you think that the course that we're on in terms of the sanction is reversible, or do we need to have a person like Mr. Morris who would make a constitutional case in terms of a referendum for us to have it reversed? Secondly, I'd like to know, I'd like to have some clarification. I saw a video, I think this week or last week, with Mr. Simmons, where he was saying that the sanction to the WTO would cause some deflationary activity in the country in the sense that, say, affordable companies may be able to come over here, and therefore they may be able to get cars at the value that they would pay for in the United States. And so, what are the deflationary aspects of the WTO and he also, in that video that I saw, confirmed some of our worst case scenarios whereby Bahamian businesses would be put, or Bahamians would be put out of business based on the inability to compete readily with foreign entities. Can you give me some clarification on that, please? Thank you.
I think these are important points that go to the heart of what I said previously, that the average Bahamian has to be able to explain a 10-point or a 12-point plan as to why the case has not been made. You don't have to prove that, you don't have to say, I disagree with the WTO. No, you have to prove that the WTO is bad for the country. The government has not made a case. No party has been involved in a case in any way that is sufficient. But certainly, we have to use this moment to educate ourselves about the country beyond our love for its beauty and understand the country in its larger philosophical context. I mentioned before the problem of the currency, the FDI and its impact on the reserves. FDI expands the amount of people drawing down on the reserves without increasing the rate of replenishment of the reserves. So that creates a problem. There's no devaluation of pay, or your pen can be broken because there's insufficient reserves to support economic activity that draws down on the reserves. And it's not just me, other people have written about that for sure. One of the things the Oxford report says, which it seems that the government has ignored, it says that if the government, under the current situation in the Bahamas, enters WTO, then that would have a negative effect. It says the government should, exactly what all of us have been saying, if you must join, delay for 3 to 5 years and let us get our house in order. Let us protect the Bahamian people. Now, people say, well, that protectionism, that's nationalism, and I can tell you this, there is no country in the world in the top tier of economies that did not get there by protection. You try to open a business in Japan today, right? There are no Verizons, there are no AT&T, there is no Citibank in Canada, right? It may be now, but not before. Canada dominated those industries: the oil industry, the banking industry, and the communications and technology industry. There's another risk to the Bahamas. If we join WTO and continue to treat our people as consumers rather than owners, one of the structural things that happens is all the infrastructure of the country becomes owned by other people, and they control all of the upgrades and resources and so on. So when the world is becoming more technological, suddenly you constantly have to appeal to foreigners for your strategic infrastructure and your infrastructure that hinges on your national security. So one of the problems, I all the time talking about technology adoption and so on, but if we don't, and I heard this discussion about technology hubs and Freeport and all that sort of thing, there's no place in the world where governments have created technology hubs.
That's correct.
But what governments have done is said, we have a certain amount of money here, and we have a certain number of problems, and we are going to put this money up as prizes for domestic technologists who solve these problems. And out of that, we are going to see who amongst our technologists have the skill and the talent and so on, the mastery, to help us build a national infrastructure and architecture for technology. So if you go to places like I said, Canada, Estonia, Singapore, foreigners don't own any aspect of their strategic infrastructure or their technology, because they know that means that every time we need an upgrade, you have to go to a foreigner. Every time we need a component change, you have to go to a foreigner. And that is a risk to our national security and, in fact, to our survival. Right? And oftentimes these companies are not the big companies. It's not going to be IBM or something. There's going to be some company in Fort Lauderdale, right? And our national security is put at risk because of that. So on those points, we have to educate our people and ensure that we can speak to this issue effectively in a program, as the gentleman said, and as my dear lady asked about us educating and organizing ourselves. There is an incredible risk, but the report got it wrong. Oh, it's the problem of FDI, the very essence of what the WTO promotes, that could challenge the peg. And lastly, we have to have independence, that's real independence in developing in this 21st century digital world. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves tethered not to some great organization like Unisys or Tata Consulting or one of the big global technology companies, but some little technology company that's a friend of a minister or something like that in Fort Lauderdale that has no greater skill to do what we need to do than we have that skill. That is the important thing.
Legally, can the people of the Bahamas go an injunction against the WTO and we have made known that we do not want it? Because what I'm thinking is, if
if they're going to continue on what they're doing, who's to say that they're not almost or haven't completed already, just trying to piecemeal it through to us? I remember in some past referendums, the wording was so off that even if they pass it, it's still a down. So I'm thinking, can people at the Bahamas legally put an injunction on the WTO and tell the very much that we do not want to can it happen?
Certainly cannot happen right now because, as far as we're aware, there's been no signing on to the WTO. This is a negotiation stage, and the government has every right to go out there and negotiate internationally. But what they must do is that if they do complete this negotiation and accept it, and is accepted at the WTO, they would have to pass domestic laws in our parliament. And it is at that stage when one could go and seek to injunct them from trying to bring it into laws. But it won't be before then.
Yeah, and that's right on that's exactly right on the legal ground. But you don't have to wait for the legal case, but to make the political case, you have to be well organized, have to have the right arguments, the facts that we state have to be the true facts. I saw somebody online saying, oh, the WTO is going to mean that foreigners are going to be able to come in here, they're going to be able to mine our organs, sell our organs, So, and my point is, okay, you can't go down that road, right? Because serious people won't take you seriously. So this needs to be a serious discussion, and we need to demonstrate all the intelligence that I know we have in this country. We need to demonstrate that intelligence by putting together a critical document that is if you like, the indictment that lays out the case and lays out why the case has not been made, what is the alternative case, and what are the steps, and then do a comparison and say, if you join the WTO and if you look at the Oxford report, it becomes very, very easy, because they couldn't show a single meaningful benefit after all that time and money and research. They couldn't show a single meaningful benefit. So you have that as a baseline. But we can show, whether it's on the retirees, whether it's on technology and climate, we can show tangible benefits that can be had right now. Right now. We can show that right now. And other countries are doing it. Costa Rica is doing it. Costa Rica is doing it on all three fronts. On energy production, which is over 90% from alternative energy. On retirees, from which they've earned $1 billion so far. And on technology, because that's the way you maximize and increase efficiency in those two areas. So those three planks, which are the planks of the future, they have mastered them already. So there are countries that are already doing it. And you know how we like to know whether somebody's done something before we put our toe in the water. So we have to make the case that no case has been made for the WTO, but the alternative is such an attractive and powerful case for which we are already trained, we are already knowledgeable, we already had half a century in the hospitality industry, we are poised and capable in this area. And we have to lay out that case and demand that this is where we want the focus of our government for the foreseeable day in the future.
Good afternoon, Mr. Morris, and John Brooks. It seems to me the deeper question is paradigm shift. I think you're saying to us that we need a paradigm shift here in Bahamas.
Yes.
And with you saying that, what can we as business leaders, I think everyone in here is business leaders just by coming out of a forum like this, what can we do to help nurture the environment to have that paradigm shift so our 11-year-olds and 10-year-olds can be like the people of Norway because they are no smarter than us.
That's right.
So how can,
That's true.
What can we do to help nurture that environment?
Well, you have groups already that such as this group that organize this. You all should organize to meet tomorrow.
Yeah.
You'd organize to meet tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you should lay out find out what the dates are. Moss has identified some of the dates. Find out what the dates are. But the first thing you do is put together your budgets and so on for the events you need to create, the expertise you need to create, and then lay out an agenda. Lay out a set of principles where you think Bahamas should go, reasons why you shouldn't join WTO. Get as many business people as possible to understand those principles. So go out and make a case to your business colleagues, get them to sign on and join. Hold as many events as possible. When I was teaching at George Mason, I taught with Carl Rove, who was George H.W. Bush's senior advisor. And I asked him, I said, Carl Rove's, George Bush's second election, how did you pull that off? I just don't understand that. And he said, that was easy. We called Ralph Reed, who was head of the Christian Coalition, and we asked him one question. Is it possible, is there a powerful pastor in all 50 states who has the capacity to reach every pastor down the chain right to the lowest ranking pastor?
That was right, remember that?
He said yes.
That's true.
And then he said, so what we said is, if we give you a message for that pastor at the top, by the end of the day, can you get that message to the pastor at the bottom in each of the 50 states? He said yes. They formulated their message that way and got a genuine Christian coalition across all 50 states. Every sermon, every interview, every advertisement, every community meeting, dominated by their point of view. And Barack Obama did the same thing in the Senate. Remember, they thought that he was going to lose Florida. And he actually ended up with a landslide in Florida because they did this micro-targeting.
Yeah.
And they were able to get their message to unique voters in particular positions and explain how these things are going to affect them. Every business person in here, you know the stories. You know the stories. A businessman told me, a big businessman, a businessman worth hundreds of millions probably. He's like, I look at this situation I see. I invested, say, in the last 3 years, almost $70 million to upgrade my businesses. I did it at the current tax rate. If they reduce the tariffs in the next 2 to 3 years, some business person is going to come here and do it at a lower rate than me. And I'm going to be stuck with the prices that have to recover my investment while that new person had it at the new rate. Now, you have people who will say things like, yes, but, it'd be good for the country, and, those new business people in other venues will be able to do it at the other rate. But we have to be in the business also protecting our existing businesses because that's the business intelligence of the country.
Yes.
This is a very important thing. I mean, there was a situation in Thailand and in China where they refused WTO initiatives because their view was the collective agricultural intelligence. We're going to destroy these farms because you'll save these farms. They don't know. We need the collective agricultural intelligence of our farmers. That's thousands of years of understanding and so on that you're going to eliminate from the commercial process. We cannot have that. That's a value to us. So what is a value to us? Is your business experience a value to us that everyone in this room wants to protect? Right? Are there people who are boat captains or people who are running tour companies or people who give to the community and who are part of the community, and you can always go to them when there's you know how we like to have cookouts when someone is sick, you can always go to the same 15 people and you can get those checks and so on. Are you going to get those checks from these new people who arrive? No. Is that a sense of community? Do you feel the need to protect that? So if you do, then every business person, you all should gather tomorrow, lay out an agenda of what you need to do, lay out how the basic principles that are needed,
retain who you need to retain, including online marketing people, but don't say anything that's ridiculous. Don't say anything because you're opening up a way for them to attack you and say you're just unreasonable and backward and you're just afraid of change and all that sort of thing. You have to say the things that are technically true, that matter, and that open the eyes of the Bahamians to the potential of this country, and provide them, in fact, with a new way and a new reason to love this country because of what it can actually do for them that has been denied in this law. And if you do that, it seems to me, if you believe the thing that brought you here tonight would bring other Bahamians into the fold, and then you have a political formula to face government. Gandhi always said, don't lead a revolution to get a government to invent a rule. Lead a revolution when there is a rule that the government refuses to obey. That's how you lead a revolution. So on this referendum point, which my brother Paul Moss has pointed out, we know that the past referendum have been nonsense.
Absolutely.
So when you lay the formula, we lay out the formula, when we do the work that's necessary, when you have those meetings, you are forcing the government to have to produce a substantive referendum because they cannot produce foolish questions then. Because you've informed the population, you've done what Carl Rove has done. You've informed the population, you've used the motivation of people to create an intellectual understanding of what this country is and what people are supposed to love as a possibility and potential of this country for their children, their neighbors, and their friends. And when you have done that, it's impossible for a government to override that without paying a price.
Good evening, Casey. Great presentation, guys. We have a lot of fishermen, farmers, retailers here in the room that would believe that going into the WTO, we're only going into the WTO with competition. Maybe you want to touch on how in 2001, and in 2001 it was all about subsidies, and to go into competition with another business is not bad. But our businesses here, like the farmers and the fishermen, will be going into competition with governments. Government gives subsidies to their fishermen to go into other countries and destroy them. You might want to touch on that. Thank you, sir.
No, you're absolutely right. One of the things I pointed out in the BFM lecture is when you're competing with China, you are competing with a firm and a country. It's a business and a country. So they provide the subsidies that are necessary. You cannot, you the individual, cannot compete with them economically. The Bahamas government isn't going to put any money behind you to support you and so on. So this is partly what the report, the Oxford report said, that use the legal profession as an example. So the Bahamas government proposed to open up the legal profession, and the report says, no, that's nonsense. How can you do that? How can you have people who are paying large sums of money for their children to go to law school, only to come back to find a place to overrun with foreign lawyers? And let us be honest, you're not going to be able to compete with them. And so they said, why don't you streamline it to specific areas, developmental areas, that currently there are no lawyers in the Bahamas practicing in those areas. But why don't you streamline your allowance to allow lawyers for those areas with the stipulation that they have to create a training nexus for Bahamians to improve situation there. The report says that the Bahamas government should not enter the WTO without massive structural changes and investment in the population to ensure that they can compete. That's what it says, right? That's what it says. Now, many of you remember who read my work, you know that I said when the government was elected, borrow $300 million and invest every dime into the Bahamians.
Yeah.
Right? Not $5 million, $300 million. and that's simply diamond surveillance. Because if you want to join the WTO, the report says you need a delay of 3 to 5 years, which for your people to prepare them. So on the fishing proposition, you all know well that if you think you have trouble with the Dominican fishing today, under the and you might say the Dominican Republic is different from China because China is definitely a firm and a country. But so is the Dominican Republic. Because the Dominican Republic is organized as a series of oligarchies, powerful families. Those powerful families in their downstream own those are related to people who are doing all the fishing and all that sort of thing. So once again, you're competing with powerful multi-billion-dollar resources where the Bahamian person is on his or her own. Last thing I would say, if you compare it to the financial services, one of the things that began to happen in the middle 2000s and so on, the U.S. just began arresting people. Just, you work at a financial services firm, you're trying to go to Miami, they just arrest you. What for? Because your name appeared in a document. They don't check to see what you did or whatever. And because they know there is no government in this country that's going to face down the U.S. government and demand that your citizenship be respected. So once again, we are asking a government that has no history of protecting Bahamian citizenship to open up our country in a manner that allows people to enjoy the fruits of the Bahamas, while the people who have toiled here and paid their taxes to see to this place and its well-being are disadvantaged in their own country. And that just does not seem to me to be, that is an Esau proposition.
Yes.
Right? That is an Esau proposition.
Very good, very good.
That makes us an Esau country. You see?
No fruit.
Business management class at CLP, and we had to do a paper on the WTO and about the pros and cons of it. I mastered that and I got an A on it, but now it's really here. But what I would like to say, I want to know the status of China entering the WTO, because last when I heard of it, China was going in as a third world nation, as the same as the Bahamas. I think, it's a vast difference from China and the Bahamas. Is China's status still going in as a third world country as the Bahamas? I see that playing field is not there. So, the WTO, going in full swing, I think by next year, this is going to take a lot of work to try to change things, because it looks like everybody's going head on with this. But I look at it from a biblical perspective as well. It's prophetic that these things should come, and no man should buy or sell unless they cut this mark or join in. So you have to look at it from a spiritual point of view as well. It's spoken on.
We can look at it from a spiritual point of view and recognize that this country was the first landfall of Columbus. And you know that God did not make a mistake. So when Columbus came here, he fully knew that he would land in the Bahamas. And he recognized that this country, having stood so far outside of the WTO, has to be his plan. It cannot be that simply because this is what is prophesied that it can by itself means then that you should capitulate, just give up and go and join. There's always a remnant who would stand, and I say that this is what this country is. Amen. And Henry Cooper made the first speech in the brand new Bahamas in 1973. He took his sermon from 1 Peter 2:9 that You are a royal priesthood. He was talking about the Payment people.
Yes.
Exactly.
You're a peculiar people.
Yes.
And therefore, that is who we are, and that is what we are. And I submit that even though it appears that this WTO is upon us, I don't think it's going to happen.
We are not accepting it.
It's not going to happen.
I have a question. C. Allen Johnson, during the original offer that we made to WTO, it is well known that the first initial offer we made was all but violently rejected by WTO. Have anyone seen, have you or anyone seen and see the comparison to that offer that was rejected by WTO to what we are now capitulating to and makes it acceptable now that they violently rejected then?
No, on the WTO website, many of the documents are blocked. I've seen the latest offer and the categories which have been laid out is very, very extensive. But the previous offer, I read the point that you made, and I hunted for it, but I can't get my hands on it. And that in itself is a terrible thing. In a democracy, these things should be transparent. They should be open to what we are presenting. But make no mistake that the final offer that's laid down, the Bahamas will have no power to resist what is demanded of it. If we are thinking in the way that governments of the Bahamas are thinking, the way to avoid those offers is just to withdraw and to say, hey, we made an error. There's another direction that we should be going in that is more prosperous to our people. If we did, the Turks and Caicos Islands is not a sovereign nation. But I was the lead strategist for a friendship agreement between Turks and Caicos and Canada, a G20 country. And so interested were the Canadians that the Prime Minister of a G20 country made time for the delegation from Turks and Caicos to 14,000 people. You understand me? Why is that? Because we were able to lay out a set of strategic options that Canada was interested in. What was that? They didn't want anything. One thing only. Canada wants to be known as a human rights country. And their thing was, allow us to work with you on a number of human rights initiatives, all right? And then you can have anything you want, in-state school fees, or everything you want. And you're 14,000 people, you have more taxi drivers in Toronto. So but it took time to, so people say, we're small, the United States is not interested in us. They don't understand the foreign policy and security proposition that we present to the United States as a third wet border for the United States. And there are issues in that third border proposition that are serious security issues, serious strategic issues, that the Bahamas, if it was, look, we allowed the Chinese in. First thing we do is we paid for Bahamas, but we let them keep it, right? So in terms of the discount of the land that we sold for that property, in terms of flying to China to negotiate for the owners, taking our time, we were not compensated for that, giving them concessions for which we got nothing. Basically the population of Exoma to come and work here from China, right, under a free concession. Then all the bad reputational hits we took when the whole thing collapsed. Then a new set of concessions again. We basically paid for the place. And then what did we do after that? We gave China the most important foreign policy gift on the earth today. Proximity to the United States of America for a rusting stadium and a parking lot on the beach. That's what we did. And we got nothing strategic out of that That the benefit. So here we are. So I'm making this point, and this is how you have to think about it. This is how you have to make your points. The U.S. interest in us is not trade; it's security. We have made a relationship with China that threatens that security. Right? For nothing. So we put ourselves in the position where our greatest trading partner could have enmity against us for something for which we got nothing. So the thinking leader then says, okay, let's rescue this situation. Forget the WTO. I'm going to put a team of people together again, as we did with Canada from the Turks and Caicos, not just to run up to the United States and just start talking out of our heads, but to put a strategic plan together, all right, and sit down with the United States and negotiate a bilateral agreement, a friendship treaty that gives the U.S. certain concessions to offset the China presence, but for benefits. Okay. For benefits. And now you are engaged in foreign policy. Now you are engaged in offsetting the power of two great powers for your own benefit. And if you look at Djibouti, and there's a prince in the United Arab Emirates called Mohammed Zayed. Don't look at MBS from Saudi Arabia, look at him. He controls U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. He is the greatest master diplomat of this current era. Forget about all these other people that you've read about. And what did he do? He figured out how to go to the United States, lay out a set of policies, convince them it's their policies, when every single one benefits his country. Do you understand me? Yes. He has the largest Air Force and military establishment of all the Emirates. But Saudi Arabia is the one wasting all their bullets, guns, planes, everything like that, while he's sitting back. What do you think is happening? When Saudi Arabia has exhausted itself, he will be in position to be the king of the region. That's how a fellow leader looking to protect his country thinks. He doesn't just, or she doesn't just look and say, well, the U.S. is here, I should just glom on to them. There's a strategic proposition that you engage in, and you cannot say that small nations do not have this power. What does that mean? We went to the same schools as they did. This isn't about muscles. This is about brain power. Yes. Brain power. Right? And the second thing is about willpower, and the third thing is love of oneself and one's people. Yes. And when you operate from that nexus, you end up like this young Mohammed Zayed, he's 59 now. He started out when he was 31, planning and strategizing to put his country in a certain position. What have we done with our proximity? Which everyone in the world is out. What is he doing? He's all the way in the Middle East, and he desires proximity with the United States in decent spirit and in policy. We are under the umbrella of the United States, and we haven't done anything strategically that. And that does not mean, listen, large countries may seem, look at CNN and MSNBC, and it may seem impossible to penetrate those countries. But there are always people in the power structure in those countries who are saying, we shouldn't be going in this direction. Those are the people you start talking to. Those are the people you start talking to. We are next door to the United States. We spend all that money in Florida. Can any government minister name the U.S. corporations that support U.S. congressmen and senators that are the greatest beneficiaries of Bahamian consumerism? If you can't name that, you don't have the first stage of a foreign policy. Because your people, and you can say Walmart, dollar rent a car, these people sell out every day and all of it. So you should know that, and should know which senators, congressmen, mayors, and so on they support, because you then leverage that relationship to say, you're not going to get our money if we don't begin begin to see some benefits coming out of this relationship. Nowhere else in the world do people spend that much money in the billions and get nothing. Nowhere in the world do people allow other countries to come and leverage their proximity and get nothing. But we did the same thing in the financial services. The Swiss came to the country. They told us what they are going to do with our sovereignty. They didn't ask us what could be done. What's your strategy? Can we join you? They did something. They laid out a proposition of the landscape. And now we are being bamboozled by the OECD and the EU because of what OECD and EU countries are doing and companies are doing in the Bahamas. Because we have not made the case. We have not made the case. So that is where we have to be. Now it requires us to lay out the case, understand our proposition, as Brother Moss said. All right, if we are a peculiar people, you can't just walk around chanting to yourself, we are peculiar. You have to do peculiar things.
That's right. I like that. That's right. That's right.
So let's do that.
Any more questions?
Yes, exactly.
Good night, everybody. Great meeting. How you doing, Mr. Morris? Have we formulated a group of audience yet that, for those of us who we have not time sometimes, who agree with everything we're saying tonight, but we want to contribute, and because everything costs. So we want to hit the ground running, and we don't want this to die off. Like you guys say, we're going to continue at this, but how can we assist in any which way?
We will have a meeting tomorrow, and then we're going to be sending out information. And so everyone that's signing up, we will forward information. So when it was decided to do this forum, it was also with the outlook that we want to have this forum so that we can take action. We're now just going to ask Mrs. Tasha Hamilton. She's the Vice President for the Northern Region for the Bahamas Public Service Union.
Thank you, Pastor. On behalf of the Coalition for Concerned Citizens, the two umbrella unions, the National Congress of Trade Unions and the Trade Union Congress, and all of the affiliates, I wish to thank you, both awesome speakers on what I call the other side of WTO. Thank you for presenting to us a fresh and new perspective, because we won't be getting the one side of the coin. Attorney Paul Moss, Professor Gilbert Morris, we thank you. We are so grateful to you for your presentation. I'd also like to thank Apostle Anthony Grant for the opening prayer. Special, very special thanks to Pastor Barry Morris for making arrangements for Professor Gilbert Morris to speak with us tonight. This is one of those forums that I would just like to part and say was priceless.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank each and every one of you for attending, and I hope that you leave this auditorium more enlightened. And as my colleague, the union brother said, I'm going to sleep better tonight. So, good night, and thank you all for your participation.
Now we're going to just close with prayer before we leave. And let me just say this. Brother Gordon stated something very true. Everything costs, and if there's any one of you that want to contribute to the efforts of what the coalition of trade unions is doing, particularly with this week, and the coalition of concerned citizens, please contribute something if you feel led to help. And so, particularly with this week of union activities, we want to also just say to everyone, there's a tremendous march that will take place on Labor Day. Every citizen is welcome to be a part of it. And it will be this Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. And we assemble at the entrance of Freeport Harbor. And going through the community of Pindus Point and Lewis Yard, ending in Hunters. So it's marching to the community where the people are. I would encourage any of you, please, bring your children, bring your children. And I heard Vice President say, bring your placards, you know, and let's really make this a tremendous Labor Day march that will send a message to all that are out there. That not only that labor is united, but we're definitely against WTO. All right, so we're going to ask my wife to come, Pastor Margaret Victor. She's going to come now and fill us out with prayer.
Thank God for this evening's meetings and the great information that we have. And you know, when we look throughout the Bible, we see that the Israelites were people a lot like us. They never saw their strength. They saw themselves as grasshoppers, even though God had put them right before the promised land. And David had a situation too when his city was overtaken. But God has a strategy for his people. And so as we come together and we hear the situation that we're challenged with, we must go to God, but we must engage in the fight. Just as our presenters made the case very clear tonight. And it's going to take investment. The Havens like to get information, but we do nothing with it. So let's pray that we will hear the strategy of God and we will engage. Amen? Amen. Father, we thank you so much for this evening when we came together to hear the situation, and we thank God for our presenters who are men who are well researched, men who have prepared themselves. And Father, we thank you for the coalitions in this room who have gathered the people together and who are concerned about the people of this nation. And so, Father, we pray that you would raise up men and women in this nation who will be bold and very courageous, because we are at the Jordan right now. It is time for us to engage. And so, Father, we pray that we will not make this political, but make this purpose, a cause that will cause this nation to become that which you ordained it to become.
Yes, Lord.
So bless each and every one here,
yes,
God. May we hear what the Spirit of the Lord is saying, and may we engage in this battle, knowing that you will cause us to become overcomers.
Yes.
In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.